Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. In this video, Steph and I are going to give you a tour of another piece of a beautiful woodland garden that was created by a friend of mine who is a retired landscape designer. This garden I was involved in the very beginning of, and I discussed that in that initial video, a retaining wall and some sidewalk and patio work that we initially did here, some grading work to just kind of get this going. And then she took off with it, and it's 30 years later coming back to this garden. It's many acres of woodland garden, and there's paths throughout it. And if Steph will pan to the right, you can see some of the paths are moss, where just the pine straw and the leaves are removed from it, actually done with a blower frequently. So a lot of it's moss paths. Then there's cedar, wood chip paths, there's stone paths. Things are created out of all kinds of things here. She's one of the most creative people I have ever known. As an example of that, these steps right here, which are covered in moss, are actually just concrete bags. So imagine a concrete bag was put there, it was wet in place, and then the paper was removed from it, and what you're left with is what looks like a stone step, but it's just literally a bag of concrete that was wet in place, and then moss grows on it later. She used those going up this steps, and so what we're going to do is walk up this little set of steps here to one of the most creative things you guys are ever going to see in a garden anywhere. Again, several of these steps were used, and then other various slate pieces. Tons of plants to go over in here in future videos. We're here in March 22nd, and so we're kind of in between a few early things that have flowered and the rest of the garden waking up, and we'll get flowering later. But this is all like a cedar wood chips through this space, and it opens up into an area. I don't know how far we are from the house at this point. Pretty good ways. Again, this is several acres of shade garden. So let's talk about planning in the garden. How long in advance could you plan for something? So she had seen this somewhere where somebody had planted 6 cedars in a circle, and then later had turned it into a structure. And so years and years ago, she planted these 6 cedars in a circle with the intent that one day she'd come back in here and turn it into a structure. And that's what this is. 2 of the cedars had died along the way, but as we know, with our they last a long time. Even after they die, they last for years and years and years. And so, especially if they're older, the older they get, the more of that material they have in them. So basically, the trees were cut. I'm 6 feet tall, so right at a little over 8 feet, they were cut. So I think 3 of the 6 had died over some period of time where they had probably competed with one another all that time. But these are actually rooted into the ground. All 6 of these. They're cut off and then angled back into the middle up here. There's brackets used to put this together. And then the limbs of the trees were used to create all the interesting, parts and pieces to it. And they weren't forced. They're not like bent in here. I mean, each of them was kind of selected because that's the natural shape it had to create this entryway that's in here. And then there's a seating area created out of the limbs and branches of the trees, just screwed together. This is one of the most amazing structures. And if you talk about a long time piece of planning, this was 30 years in the making and was just recently finished. pointed out in the first video, there's an amazing amount of garden art that's been collected for this garden over 30 years. So you'll see lots of interesting little things as we go up this next path. And so we come up those steps, this structure, which was 30 years in the planning, and there's still some additional pieces here that she's going to create some other interesting things out of. I'm sure you know, that will all be creative as well. We're going to walk up a path here. This is for this property, a sunny place. So most of this property is high shade. You know, the trees have kind of limbed themselves up over time, so you get bright light in here, but it's still a very shady garden space. She's got a section here that's just wood chips, arborist wood chips. It may have come from taking a tree down on this property in all likelihood. And then it's lined with various ground cover plants. We're here in March, and so, you know, you're seeing all these hellebores bloom here right now, but I can see down in there irises and other things coming up through there. So, you know, the hellebores will be done, and it won't just be nothing. There's always something else coming up in the middle of something in this garden. There's a crepe myrtle, so she's getting enough light for it. And I don't know which one this is, but it's gotten old enough now that it's got the beautiful, beautiful bark on it. There's actually another one right here that I hadn't noticed. There's a white flowering loropetalum that's in full flower there. And then there's another crepe myrtle that I'm seeing that was next to the structure as well. And if we coming on up this path, this place is always transitioning. And so rather than have wood chip paths or cedar paths everywhere, we've seen steps made out of concrete bags, and then we've seen cedar chips, and now then wood chips, and then now there's a little pea gravel patio that's surrounded by stone. She's had to manage some water on this property there's a farm pond back here behind this property, and water comes through it. And so there's some challenges here and there, and we'll see some of those in additional videos at some point in the future. That, you know, this actual space right here is a little mound that was created to divert water a different direction. And so you wouldn't notice it because it becomes, you know, part of the landscape, but literally this was just built up to divert water a different direction because it was washing things out going that direction. Lots of deciduous flowering plants that are just waking up in this garden. Southern magnolia back here in the background. Just getting going. And then we transition to a little bit of grass. This is the only turf, I think, on the entire acre. You know, I can't remember how many acres she told me this actually is. I think this is the only piece of turf on the entire thing. There's a weeping gold abelia right here. That foliage color looks great. These will bloom during the summertime. Great for the pollinators at that time. I think that's Canyon Creek, if I am correct in naming that variety. I think that's Canyon Creek abelia. She had a big giant tree fall not that long ago, and everything here, rather than tote this material out of here, basically a little wall was built out of the material, and then she put a place for all the some of our native bees to live, a couple bird houses, and just integrated the dying tree back into the landscape. And again, there's just lots of various. There's camellia here. This is her sunny space. So I see salvia coming up in here, several different salvias, and sun perennials. Not a whole lot of sunny space. This is a gold-leafed winter jasmine. So this would have bloomed white or yellow here a few weeks ago. And actually, I can still see one flower up there, but then the gold foliage is coming out on it right now, underplanted with a salvia. And again, I think this is just a beautiful view going up all the way to the top there. There I see Japanese maples up there. I see deciduous magnolia up there. Just lots and lots of interesting places. And you can see just in, I don't know how far we just walked, just a few hundred feet, how many transitions there were in materials that were used, and you know, the things that made the paths, and of course that structure is just beyond. So thank you guys for following along with the channel. We're going to again come back later in the year and shoot a couple other things on this really interesting shade garden near Raleigh, North Carolina. Thanks for watching.